The sun was melting into the horizon, bleeding orange and gold across the cracked asphalt of a forgotten country road. A faint smell of burnt oil lingered in the air, and the distant hum of crickets filled the silence between gusts of warm evening wind. By the roadside stood a Ferrari 458, its hood open, its proud red skin dulled by dust and neglect. The woman behind the wheel, dressed in an immaculate white suit and heels that didn't belong anywhere near gravel, stared helplessly at the smoking engine. Her name was Amelia Sinclair, the kind of woman whose life had always been paved with luxury, and today it was crumbling before her eyes. A few meters away, Ethan Miller was packing up his tools. He wasn't supposed to be here. His shift had ended 2 hours ago, but his old truck had broken down again, forcing him to take the long way home. When he saw the stranded Ferrari, he almost kept driving. After all, what could a mechanic with grease under his nails possibly offer to a woman like her? But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she kicked the tire, cursing under her breath. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes that didn't fit the diamond ring on her finger. Before we dive deeper into their story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. It truly helps me bring you more unforgettable tales every week. Ethan parked his truck behind the Ferrari and stepped out, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. "You need help?" he called, his voice cautious, polite, the kind of tone people use when they're not sure they're welcome. Amelia turned, startled for a moment, then sighed in relief. "Yes, please." It just stopped. "I was driving to the estate and..." She gestured helplessly at the hood. "It's dead." He approached, peered under the hood, and whistled softly. "You've got a ruptured coolant hose. Probably overheated the block. Give me a few minutes, I'll see what I can do." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "You can fix that?" "Here." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've fixed worse. But I'll need to improvise." She hesitated, watching as he rummaged through his truck for tools, duct tape, and a spare clamp. The contrast between them was almost absurd. His oil-stained shirt against her spotless designer blouse, his sunburned hands against her manicured fingers. Yet there was something quietly comforting in the way he worked. Steady, confident, almost gentle. Minutes turned into half an hour. The sky deepened to violet. Amelia leaned against the car, arms crossed, occasionally glancing at him. She wasn't used to being ignored, and yet Ethan didn't look up once. Not to flirt, not to impress. He simply worked, and for reasons she couldn't name, that unsettled her. "You didn't even ask what's in it for you," she said finally. He glanced at her, eyes soft but tired. "You look like you've already got enough problems." "Payment isn't one of them." That answer struck her harder than she expected. When the engine finally coughed back to life, a low purr filled the air, smooth and strong. Ethan wiped his hands again and nodded. "There you go. She'll get you where you need to go, but you should have it properly serviced soon." Amelia reached for her purse. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing." She froze. "Nothing? You just spent an hour fixing my car." He shrugged. "You looked like you needed help." "That's enough." Her lips parted, ready to argue, but the words didn't come. She'd spent her entire life surrounded by people who expected something. Money, favors, recognition. No one had ever simply helped her, not without a reason. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her tone lacked its usual authority. It was fragile, honest. Ethan nodded, already walking toward his truck. "Take care of yourself, ma'am." As she watched him drive off into the dusk, a strange ache filled her chest. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe admiration. Maybe both. But one thing was certain. This moment, insignificant as it seemed, would not end here. The next morning, Amelia sat in her office, staring out the glass wall that overlooked the city skyline. Her assistant droned on about meetings and deadlines, but her mind was elsewhere, on that man in the torn shirt, the one who fixed her car without asking for anything. The memory wouldn't leave her. His voice, his simplicity, the look in his eyes. "Miss Sinclair?" the assistant prompted. Amelia blinked. "Cancel everything after 2. "Everything?" "Yes, I need to go somewhere." 2 hours later, her Ferrari glided into a small town garage on the edge of the city. The sign read, "Miller Auto Repair." The place was small, cluttered, almost falling apart, but it had life. A radio played old rock songs, and the smell of oil mixed with the faint aroma of coffee. Ethan looked up from under a car, surprise flickering in his expression when he saw her. "You again?" Amelia smiled faintly. "You told me to get it serviced properly, so here I am." He chuckled. "Didn't think you'd take that seriously." "I usually don't listen to anyone," she admitted. "But you're different." They talked as he worked, about nothing and everything. The weather, cars, how she hated corporate meetings, how he dreamed of opening a bigger shop someday. For the first time in years, Amelia found herself laughing, really laughing. It was unnerving and wonderful all at once. As he wiped the hood, she noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just long days, you know? Business isn't great lately." Her chest tightened. Something about his quiet tone hurt more than it should. When he turned away to clean his tools, she slipped an envelope onto his workbench. Inside was a check for $10,000. A thank you. But when she got home that night, she found the same envelope waiting on her doorstep, with a note inside. "You can't buy kindness. You can only return it. E.M." Her throat tightened as she read the words again and again. She had built her entire empire on transactions, yet this man refused to take anything from her. That defiance unsettled her more than any boardroom battle ever could. She didn't sleep that night. The city outside glittered as always, but for the first time, she felt its emptiness. She realized how many people surrounded her, and how few saw her. Ethan had seen her, if only for a moment, not as Amelia Sinclair, CEO, but as a person stranded by the road, helpless and human. By sunrise, she had made up her mind. She was going to find a way to repay him, on her own terms. And that's where it all began. One act of kindness, a Ferrari on a dusty road, and 2 people from different worlds colliding in a way neither of them expected. But Amelia's idea of gratitude would soon turn into something that would change both of their lives forever. The rain started in a fine mist that afternoon, the kind that settles on the skin and makes everything look softer than it is. Amelia parked across from Miller Auto Repair and watched the way the water beaded on the roof, gathering, then skittering down in hurried rivulets. She hadn't planned to come back so soon, but plans were things she made for other people. For herself, she followed impulses, and this impulse, she told herself, was a good one. She had spent the night designing it, turning it around in her mind, the way she turned numbers and deals. Help a man who didn't want to be helped, without insulting him. Reward kindness, without buying it. She knew it was a thin line to walk, but she had built a life on thin lines and immaculate balance. Ethan was under a pickup, boots visible, the radio barely audible beneath the drum of rain on the corrugated roof. She stepped inside. The smell of motor oil and damp cotton hit her, grounding her in a world that never pretended to be more than it was. He slid out on the creeper, squinted up at her, and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. You again. Me again, she said, and smiled. You have a minute? He pushed himself to his feet. The shop's light turned the raindrops on his hair into a faint halo, which would have been funny if the rest of him didn't look so tired. What's wrong with the car this time? Nothing. It's about yesterday. She felt the envelope in her handbag like a hot coal and left it there. I thought about what you said. About not taking money. I said I wouldn't take yours, he replied. That's different. It shouldn't be, she said, pushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. But point taken. So I want to make you an offer, not a handout. She paused, gauging the distance between them. A contract. Something flickered across his face. Not interest. Not anger yet. But its cousin. What kind of contract? A service retainer, she said, steady now, allowing the professional in her to speak. My company has a fleet of vehicles in the city. Black sedans, 2 vans, some executive cars. The garage we use is overpriced and underwhelming. I want to give that business to you. Fair rate. Monthly invoice. We pay on time every time. He looked past her, as though the idea might be written in the rain. You came all the way out here to do that? You came all the way to a country road to help me, she said. I thought reciprocity would be appropriate. That's not reciprocity, he said carefully. That's you buying what you think I need. It's business, she countered, injecting lightness into her tone. You prefer business, don't you? Clean lines, work for pay, no charity involved. He studied her for a moment, then glanced down at his hands. And if I say no? You won't, she said calmly, though a small knot tightened in her stomach. Not because you need it, though I suspect you do. Because it's a good deal. You earned it. He swallowed, then nodded once. Come to the office. Such as it is. They walked to a cramped room with a desk that had seen too many summers. A map of the county hung on the wall, corners curled, towns you could miss if you blinked marked with pushpins. He cleared a pile of invoices, and she sat, crossing her legs, the white of her suit too stark for the room. She took out a folder and set it between them. The basics, she said. Scope, rates, response times. We can adjust. He didn't touch the folder. You wrote a contract for me in one night. I've written a contract on a napkin during turbulence and a lightning storm, she said. This is a vacation. His mouth twitched, the suggestion of a smile, but it didn't last. He opened the folder and scanned the top page. His eyes moved quicker at first, then slowed. Something hardened in his jaw. He flipped a page, then another. You included a capital infusion. It's a small line of credit, she said lightly, to expand the shop. Tools, lifts, maybe a couple of techs. It's secured against the new business. You'll pay it off with revenue in 6 months. He shut the folder. The radio crackled and fell silent. Outside, a semi roared past, drenching the window in a sheet of water. I don't want your money, Ms. Sinclair. It's not mine. It's the companies, she said, immediately hating how flat that sounded. It's not charity. It's a business loan. Market rate. He met her eyes then, and the room felt smaller. You're not hearing me. She sat back, fingers tightening against the thin arms of the chair. She had learned to read the moment a negotiation turned, that precise second when the other person decided not just to resist, but to defend something invisible. Ego, pride, fear. She had never been cruel in those moments, just efficient. Move the terms, sweeten the pot, make the math feel like mercy. But this wasn't a boardroom, and the numbers were a token that could not represent what they needed to represent. What am I missing? She asked, quietly this time. Help me understand. He paced once, twice, like a man who did not trust his words to sit still in his throat. You think you're fixing a problem, he said, because that's what you do. You see a crack, you pour gold into it, and you call it art. But this isn't a crack you can fill. If I take that money, I'm not the man who helped you by the side of the road anymore. I'm the man who took your money. You'd be the man who built something with it, she said. Not for me. For yourself. He shook his head, almost tenderly. I'm sorry. I know you mean well, but we're not the same type of people. The words weren't meant to wound. Still, they did. She heard a door lock from the inside. She stood, smoothing fabric that didn't need smoothing. Then keep the contract and think about the service part. No loans, no strings, a clean deal. He hesitated. I'll think about it. She left the folder there and walked back through the shop into the rain, which had softened to a whisper. In the car, she let the mask slip. She didn't cry, not because she couldn't, but because tears were a kind of language, and she didn't yet know what this moment was trying to say. She drove without music, the engine a faithful heartbeat beneath her, and for once, it comforted nothing. By evening, the town had done what towns do best, turned a small thing into a story. At the diner, Mrs. Hawthorne told two regulars that the Sinclair heiress had been seen at Miller's garage in a white suit you could see the moon in. At the barber shop, someone speculated that Ethan had finally landed a break big enough to pay for his mother's physical therapy. At the grocery, a teenage clerk posted a blurry photo of Amelia's Ferrari on social media with the caption, "Is Ethan dating a movie star now?" It spread fast, because all heat does when the air is dry. Ethan heard the chatter when he stopped for coffee after closing. He paid and left by the back door, but gossip slips through walls. By the time he got home, his sister Lila had texted, "What's this about you and a Ferrari?" He ignored it, not unkindly, cooked eggs he didn't want, and fell asleep on the couch with the TV murmuring to no one. The next morning, the folder was still on his desk, smug and patient. He opened it again, slower this time. The service retainer was clean, hours, rates, emergency call-outs. No fluff, no candy. He could do the work. He could hire Marco back, the kid he'd had to let go when things got thin. He could fix the hydraulic lift that squealed every time it raised a truck past the sweet spot. He could replace the balding tires on his own pickup that preached humility every time it rained. He closed the folder and exhaled. Maybe he should call her. Not to thank her, just to say yes to the part that wasn't an insult. He didn't call. Instead, around noon, Amelia returned, not in the Ferrari this time, but in a black sedan without vanity. She carried no umbrella. The rain had stopped and the air tasted like metal. He felt himself brace when she stepped inside, though for what, he wasn't sure. "I read it again," he said, before she could speak. "I'll accept the service contract. No credit, no expansion money, just the work." She nodded, a quiet relief loosening her features. "That's all I wanted." "That's not all you wanted," he said, but there was no accusation in it. "And I'm sorry I can't be the version of this story that makes sense to you." Something in the way he said it, gentle, unbending, eased a pressure behind her eyes. "I didn't earn the right to write your ending," she said. "I'm learning that." They signed on the hood of a car with a pen that fought the rough metal. She told him she'd have the first work order by next week and left, smallest of smiles on her lips, the kind you give when you've salvaged a thing from the brink of misinterpretation. It should have been the quiet end of a quiet chapter. It wasn't. That evening, a city blog picked up the blurry photo and wrote a headline that suggested a fairy tale with grease. The comments were unkind, in the way that only people who will never meet you know how to be. "She's buying another pet project. He's selling out. Must be nice to have your problems." She didn't care about being misunderstood. That had been the price of her life since the first time someone wrote an article about her shoes instead of her profits. But Ethan, she thought of him reading those words and choosing not to answer, of him turning off the phone and sitting at that chipped desk in the quiet. The knot in her stomach returned and grew roots. She called him. He didn't pick up. She stood by her window, the skyline meticulous and brilliant, and dialed again. On the third try, he answered. "Miss Sinclair." "Amelia," she said, softer than she meant to be. "I'm sorry about the noise." "I don't read comments," he said, which was not the same as saying they didn't land. "We're fine." "You're not," she said, "and I'm not either." "Let me." She stopped herself from finishing the sentence with "fix it." "Let me at least explain." "You don't owe me that," he said, but he didn't hang up. "When I was 22, she said, I took over a branch in a city I couldn't afford to live in without sleeping on a friend's couch. My father thought it would teach me to be hungry, which is a word men use when they want you to become a lion without admitting they're throwing you raw meat." She let the silence breathe. "I learned how to solve problems other people made. I got good at it, somewhere in the middle of becoming competent. I forgot how to say thank you without turning it into a transaction." He was quiet so long she thought the call had dropped. "That's not a sin," he said finally. "It's just a habit." "And you broke it," she said, "on a road with no one watching. So I pushed back the only way I know. If I offended you." "You did," he said, and the honesty was almost tender. "But not because you meant to. Because you can't see what it cost me to say no." "I'm listening," she said. He exhaled, the sound of a door opening inward. "My dad took charity like it was oxygen. From neighbors, from the church, from anyone who'd let him owe them a favor he'd never repay. Every gift had a string. I learned to cut them before they tied themselves around my neck. When you offered that loan, it wasn't about the money. It was about that feeling. A knot I thought I'd learned to outrun." She closed her eyes. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," he said. "I know it now. That's why I took the contract. It's work. It's clean." "Then let me keep it clean," she said. "I'll have my operations team work with you directly. Nothing public, no press, no photos. If anyone calls, we tell them the truth. 2 people signed a service agreement. End of story. That would help, he said, and she heard gratitude there, spare and unadorned. Thank you. She smiled and let herself sit on the edge of her desk like she did when she was tired of performing an executive. Since we're telling truths, she said, there is one more thing. He laughed once softly. There's always one more thing with you. I don't want it to be, she said. But here we are. My mother passed when I was 19. She loved cars. Ridiculous, right? She taught me to parallel park in 3 moves and told me engines had moods like people do. When my Ferrari died on that road, it wasn't just an inconvenience. It felt like watching something I loved stop breathing. You brought it back, for free. That means more than my words can say without sounding like a postcard. He didn't speak at first. When he did, his voice had gone rough. I'm sorry about your mom. Me too, she said. Some days less. Yesterday more. They ended the call there, and she leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, letting the city hum through her. If the story had a center, she thought, it had moved. Not from money to principle, or from pride to concession, but from strangers to something that might, if carefully held, be called respect. The next days were practical in the way that calms an unsettled heart. Work orders arrived. Ethan scheduled service slots like a man laying bricks. He hired Marco back and showed him, with more patience than he'd learned from anyone else, how to find the sound a failing belt makes under the radio, and the weather, and a customer's story about a vacation. He ordered parts. He turned wrenches. He forgot to eat lunch. He remembered to call his sister. On Friday, Amelia arrived unannounced, again in the unremarkable sedan. She wore jeans and a navy blouse and looked like an approximation of a person who doesn't own a corner office. I brought coffee, she said, holding out a tray like a treaty. He took one, then another, and passed it to Marco, who raised his cup in a salute and fled, grinning. They stood there with paper warmth in their hands, while the lift raised an SUV and the shop's hum settled around them. I want to do something, she said finally, eyes on the car overhead. But I don't want to cross a line. He waited. There's a community scholarship in your town, she said, for vocational training. It recently lost funding. I could replace it, anonymously, no press. If anyone asks, it's the foundation that's named after my mother. It exists. We fund music programs mostly. And engines have moods, she used to say. It feels right. He watched her carefully. And if someone finds out, then they'll have to live with a world where a thing can be both true and unbought, she said. I can live with that. Can you? He considered this, weighing the object in his palm that wasn't the coffee cup. If it's anonymous and it stays anonymous, yes. It will, she said. I'm good at keeping the right secrets. He smiled then, genuinely, and the shop felt briefly less like a place where things are repaired and more like a place where they begin again. Then do it, he said, for the kids who love machines and don't know that's allowed. She nodded. Done. As she turned to leave, a battered sedan pulled up out front, coughing and shuddering. A woman stepped out with a child on her hip, and worry written in the slope of her shoulders. Ethan moved without thinking, already reading the car by ear. Amelia paused at the door and watched him kneel to the child's eye level, joke about the car sounding like it swallowed a bee, Ask the mother what she could afford and mean it. Something in her steadied at the sight, like a compass needle finding north after too many turns. On the drive back to the city, the radio announced a traffic jam on the bridge and a politician's promise of something that would cost too much and deliver too little. She turned it off and let the quiet gather. The line she had tried to walk had cut her more than once, but she had found a way across it without bleeding out the part of herself she wasn't yet ready to lose. That night, she received an email from her foundation director confirming the scholarship endowment. No mention of her name, no signature beyond the formalities. She stared at it a long time, then forwarded it to no one. Some satisfactions are meant to be private. Ethan closed the shop late. He balanced the books and found, with a quiet shock, that the numbers made a shape that could be called sustainable. He turned off the lights one by one, stood in the doorway, and breathed the smell of oil and rain and the last hint of coffee. His phone buzzed. A message from Lila. "Proud of you. Also, Mom's therapist can add another session if we can swing it." He typed back, "We can." He added a smiley face he would deny to anyone who asked. Outside, the road shone with the day's last rain. He locked the door and listened to the heavy quiet of a small town that still believed in the story of itself. He thought of Amelia's voice when she spoke of her mother and of the way she had said engines had moods. He imagined telling his father that principle and dignity didn't have to mean saying no to all help, just the kind that wanted to own you after it entered your house. He imagined, briefly and with surprise, what he might look like in 6 months, a year, not richer, but larger somehow inside his own skin. He walked to his truck and, without meaning to, looked up. The sky had cleared. Stars had begun, cautious and bright as new promises. He didn't make a wish. He made a decision instead, to believe, for one more day, that a clean deal could be a bridge between two people who had learned to mistrust everything that wore a price tag. Then he drove home, and for the first time in a while, the road felt like it was leading somewhere worth arriving. The following morning broke cold and silver. A faint fog hung over the town, softening every sound. Amelia woke before dawn, restless, the kind of restlessness that didn't come from exhaustion, but from something unnamed pressing beneath the ribs. The scholarship fund was already approved. Her assistant had emailed the signed confirmation, but she hadn't replied. She just stared at the screen, at her name absent from the donor line, and felt something hollow expand quietly inside her. It wasn't pride or satisfaction. It was stillness, the kind that follows after too much noise. She dressed simply and left the penthouse before the city woke. Her driver blinked in surprise when she told him to take her to the garage again. She didn't explain. Some things didn't need words. Ethan was already there when she arrived, coffee steaming on the workbench, radio murmuring low jazz. The shop smelled like oil and wet metal. He looked up, eyes tired but clear. "Morning." "Morning," she said. "Did I interrupt?" "Only breakfast." He gestured to a paper bag half open on the table. "Want a donut?" "It's not boardroom catering, but it's got character." She laughed softly. "I haven't had breakfast in a garage before. First time for everything." They ate in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. The quiet between them had shifted, no longer filled with pride or unease, but with something like recognition. Yet under the surface, both knew there was still a conversation they hadn't had. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. You came to check if I cashed the contract check, didn't you? She looked at him, amused. Would it bother you if I said yes? Not really. You'd be predictable then. Predictable, she repeated, tasting the word. I suppose that's true. He smiled faintly. It's not a bad thing. People like us need predictability. You build companies out of it. I build engines. Same thing, really. Except yours make money and mine make noise. Her gaze softened. Maybe. But yours keep people moving. Mine just keep them busy. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the open bay door and looked outside, where the fog was thinning into morning light. You ever think about quitting? He asked quietly. She blinked. Quitting what? All of it. The pressure. The expectations. The pretending. She hesitated. More than I'd like to admit. But I don't know who I'd be without it. That's the trap, isn't it? He said. We build cages and call them careers. The words hit harder than he probably intended. She had spent years telling herself that every sleepless night, every ruthless deal, every sacrifice was worth it. But worth what, exactly? Her success had bought her everything except peace. She turned toward him. And you? You've got your shop, your independence. Doesn't that ever feel like a cage, too? He considered that. Maybe. But it's a cage I built with my own hands. That makes it easier to live inside. Amelia didn't reply. She just nodded slowly. The fog had lifted, and the first beams of sunlight stretched across the workshop floor, warming the cold air. For a brief, fragile moment, the world felt like it was holding its breath. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He frowned at the caller ID, then answered. Hey, Lila. What's wrong? Amelia couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she saw his expression change. First confusion, then worry. He turned away slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah. Okay. I'll come. No, don't panic. I'll handle it. He hung up, exhaling sharply. Everything all right? She asked. He hesitated. My sister's landlord. They're threatening eviction. She's behind on rent again. I'm sorry, she said softly. He waved a hand. It's not your problem. Maybe not, she said, but that doesn't mean I don't care. He looked at her, really looked at her, and shook his head. You always want to fix things. She smiled sadly. You always want to pretend you don't need anyone. They stood there, the silence between them heavier this time. Then he sighed, grabbed his jacket, and said, I'll close the shop early today. Family comes first. Of course, she said. Do you need a ride? He almost said no, then thought better of it. Sure, thanks. The drive was quiet. The city gave way to smaller streets, the kind lined with aging houses and yards overgrown with stubborn weeds. When they reached Lila's building, Amelia stayed in the car while Ethan went inside. Through the windshield, she could see his silhouette moving through the window, gestures sharp, then soft, then still. 15 minutes later, he came back, looking older somehow. She's okay? Amelia asked. Yeah, he said. For now. I covered the rent this month. But next month, I don't know. She opened her mouth to say something, but he stopped her with a look and... Don't. Please. Not this time. She nodded. The pain in his eyes wasn't about money. It was about pride and the exhaustion of carrying too much alone. She understood it better than she wanted to. When he stepped out of the car, she caught his sleeve. "Ethan?" He turned. "I know you don't want help," she said quietly. "But sometimes help isn't charity. Sometimes it's just someone standing next to you so you don't fall." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, without a word, he gave her a small nod and walked away. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She kept seeing his face, the tired eyes, the weight he tried to hide. So she did what she always did when she didn't know what to do. She worked. She called her foundation director again. "We're expanding the scholarship," she said. "Include a family support clause. Emergency grants for dependents of vocational students." Quietly. No publicity. The director hesitated. "Understood. Any particular family in mind?" Amelia paused. "Just start with one. You'll know which." 2 days later, Ethan received a letter in the mail. The envelope was plain, the paper thick. It wasn't from Amelia, or so he thought. There was no signature, no logo, only a short typed message. "Your sister, Lila Miller, has been awarded the Sinclair Technical Grant for Community Assistance. Funds will cover housing and health expenses for 6 months. No application necessary. We believe in your work." He read it twice, then a third time, anger and confusion tangling together. He didn't need to guess who was behind it. He stormed into his truck and drove toward the city. The skyline rose like glass in judgment. He didn't call ahead. He didn't even think. He just knew he couldn't let her do this. Not again. When he arrived at Sinclair Industries, the lobby gleamed like another world. He must have looked out of place, covered in grease and road dust, because the receptionist blinked before asking if he had an appointment. "She'll see me," he said, voice low. And somehow she did. Amelia looked up from her desk, startled, but not surprised. "Ethan." He dropped the letter on her table. "You just can't stop, can you?" She stood slowly. "It wasn't alone. It wasn't even from me. You think hiding behind a foundation makes it different?" His voice cracked, louder now. "You went around me. You made me a charity case through my family. Do you have any idea what that does to a man?" Her throat tightened. "I was trying to help." "No," he said. "You were trying to erase the part of me that doesn't fit your idea of goodness." "That's not fair," she whispered. "Neither is the world you live in," he shot back. "But at least it's honest about what it is." The words stung like glass. She took a breath, steady but trembling. "You're angry because you think this makes you small." "It doesn't. It means someone finally cared enough to notice." "I don't need to be noticed," he said. "I need to be respected." That silence afterward was colder than the fog that morning. He turned to leave and she didn't stop him. The letter lay between them, a paper scar neither could erase. When the door closed, Amelia sank into her chair, feeling the familiar weight of defeat pressing against her chest. For once, success had brought nothing but loss. She had built empires out of deals and numbers, but she couldn't seem to build a bridge to one honest heart. She opened her laptop and stared at the screen until her reflection blurred into the glass city behind her. Somewhere between pride and regret, she whispered to herself, "I only wanted to say thank you." Outside, the sky darkened. Rain began again, soft, relentless, forgiving nothing. And in the quiet of that storm, two people on opposite sides of a city tried to understand how an act of kindness could turn into something that hurt them both. Yet neither of them knew that the story wasn't finished, that the next time they met, it wouldn't be by choice, but by chance. Ethan didn't go to work the next morning. He sat on his porch, a mug of coffee cooling beside him, the letter still folded in his jacket pocket. The world outside was loud with ordinary sounds. Birds, a passing truck, a neighbor's radio, but inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Anger, shame, confusion, they'd all burned themselves out, leaving only exhaustion. He'd spent his whole life believing that pride was the same as dignity, that saying no was the only way to stay upright in a world that kept trying to bend you. But now, for the first time, he wasn't sure what upright meant anymore. He had pushed away a woman who had done nothing but try to help. A woman who, he had to admit it, had begun to matter more than he wanted her to. By noon, the garage phone had rung 3 times. He didn't answer. On the 4th, it stopped. Then his cell buzzed. It was Marco. "Boss," he said, voice tight. "You need to come down here. Now." Ethan grabbed his keys, heart quickening. When he arrived, the smell of burning oil hit him first. Smoke curled from under the hood of an SUV on the lift. Marco stood beside it, pale and shaken. "The hydraulic seal gave out," he said. "I was trying to lower it when it snapped." Ethan's stomach dropped. The hydraulic lift, the one he'd been meaning to replace for months, hung twisted, groaning under the weight of the vehicle. The safety lock had barely caught, if it hadn't. "Get outside," Ethan ordered, his voice steady even though his hands were trembling. Together they secured the vehicle with jacks and chains until the danger passed. Only then did Ethan let himself breathe. The shop was a mess. The repair costs would bury him. Insurance wouldn't cover it. He hadn't renewed the premium last quarter. He sank onto a stool and covered his face with his hands. He didn't notice the black sedan pulling up until a familiar voice broke through the hum of the cooling metal. "Ethan." He looked up, disbelief crossing his features. "Amelia. What are you doing here?" "I read the news," she said softly. "Local report. I thought." She trailed off, seeing the smoke stains, the collapsed lift. "Oh God, are you all right?" "Fine," he said, voice hollow. "Marco, too. Could have been worse." She stepped closer, careful, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "You should have told me about this equipment." "I could have." He raised a hand. "Don't." "I wasn't going to offer money," she said quickly. "Not this time. Just help." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "You shouldn't even be here." "I know," she said, "but I couldn't not come." The silence between them stretched, heavy and fragile. Then she spoke again, quieter this time. "I owe you an apology." He looked at her confused. "You?" "Yes," she said. "For everything. For thinking I could fix things my way. For not listening when you told me no. I was wrong. I thought giving was the same as caring. It isn't. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just stand still and let someone breathe." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. "You taught me that." Ethan swallowed hard. "You didn't owe me an apology, Amelia." "I did," she insisted, "because I hurt you. And I never wanted to be another person who did that." He didn't know what to say. All his anger had nowhere left to go. The fire had gone out, and in its place there was only the quiet ache of something unspoken. gratitude, maybe forgiveness. After a while, he said, "You can't keep apologizing for caring. The world doesn't need fewer people like you. It just needs you to stay real." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll try." They stood there a long time, neither moving. Outside, the light shifted, and the smell of rain crept in again. After a while, Amelia took a breath. "I have to tell you something. When I set up that scholarship, I didn't do it just for your sister. I did it because I needed to believe that not everything in my life had to have my name on it. I thought anonymity would make it pure. But maybe I was still trying to prove something." Ethan nodded slowly. "You were trying to prove you're good. You didn't have to." "Maybe I did," she said quietly. "For myself." He looked at her then, not as a stranger from another world, not as a millionaire who could buy and sell everything he owned, but as a woman trying to remember who she was before the world started keeping score. And for the first time, he smiled, not politely, not guardedly, but the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep. "Thank you for coming, Amelia. I wasn't sure you'd let me." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But I'm glad you did." They walked outside together. The rain had started again, thin and steady, soaking into the earth. She turned to him. "You'll rebuild?" "Yeah," he said. "I'll figure it out. One way or another." "I can help find suppliers," she said quickly, then stopped herself, laughing softly. "Sorry, old habits." He chuckled. "It's okay. You can send me phone numbers, not checks." "Deal." They stood under the awning for a moment longer, watching the rain hit the pavement like tiny silver nails. There was peace in the rhythm. After a while, she said, "Ethan, I meant what I said before, about you teaching me something. I don't want this to end with guilt. I want it to mean something." He nodded. "Maybe it already does." She smiled. "Maybe it does." Before getting into her car, she hesitated. "One more thing. You should know, the Foundation's next scholarship recipients are from your town. They'll need mentors, real ones, people who understand what hard work looks like. I gave them your name." He raised an eyebrow. "You trying to recruit me now?" "No," she said. "Just sharing the work." He laughed quietly. "We'll see." She waved once, then drove off, the rain swallowing the sound of her engine. Ethan watched until the taillights disappeared behind the curve. For a long time after, he didn't move. He went back inside the shop and looked at the broken lift. It wasn't just metal, it was a lesson. Things fall apart, yes, but not everything that breaks is lost. Some things, when rebuilt, come back stronger. He found himself whispering into the empty room. Maybe forgiveness is a kind of rebuilding too. Outside, the rain eased. The world smelled new again. Before we close this part of the story, I'd love to hear what you think. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have forgiven Amelia or walked away? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you're still here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends. Trust me, the next part will surprise you. That night, Ethan closed the garage early. He walked home through quiet streets, the kind that only small towns have after a storm. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, its whistle long and lonely. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to meet it. He looked up at the stars peeking through the clouds and thought of Amelia's voice, steady, sincere, imperfectly human. Maybe she hadn't changed his life. Maybe she'd just reminded him that it was still his to live, and that was enough. The first snow of the season came early that year. It dusted the roofs, softened the edges of broken fences, and made even the old gas station across from Miller Auto Repair look almost beautiful. Ethan stood by the window, watching the flakes melt against the warm glass. The shop was quiet. No hissing engines, no chatter. Just the hum of the heater and the faint ticking of the clock above the door. For the first time in months, everything felt settled. It had been 3 weeks since the accident with the lift. The repairs were nearly done. A friend from a neighboring town had sold him a used hydraulic system for next to nothing. Marco was back, working part-time, and business was slowly returning. The scholarship Amelia mentioned had launched, and every few days a new student stopped by the shop asking for advice. Ethan had agreed to mentor them. It felt strange at first to have people looking to him for guidance, but it also felt good, solid, real. He reached for his coffee and noticed the old photo taped above his workbench. It was his mother, smiling from behind a pile of tools, grease on her cheek. She used to say that machines only break when people forget to listen. He smiled softly. Maybe people weren't that different. The bell above the door jingled. He turned, expecting a customer, but instead, Amelia stood there, brushing snow from her coat. She looked different today. Softer, maybe. Her hair was pulled back, and she carried no briefcase, no papers, just a small wrapped box in her hands. "Hey," he said, surprised. "You didn't call." "I know," she said, smiling. "I thought I'd risk spontaneity for once." He grinned. Dangerous move. She looked around the shop, eyes bright. "It's coming together." "Slowly," he said. "But I'll get there." I never doubted that. There was a pause, comfortable, quiet. Then she held out the box. "I brought you something." He raised an eyebrow. "Amelia, if this is expensive—" "It's not," she interrupted gently. "And before you refuse, just listen." He took the box reluctantly, untying the ribbon with calloused fingers. Inside was a small metal key, polished silver, attached to a leather tag engraved with 3 simple words: "For what you rebuilt." He looked up at her, confusion flickering into realization. I didn't buy you anything," she said quickly. "Not really." The keys to the community workshop building down the road. The town was selling it last month. Your name's on the deed now. It's not a gift. It's a project. Yours to run, fix, rent, whatever you want. You'll be mentoring students there anyway. It just made sense. He stared at her, speechless. "Amelia, that's—" "Don't thank me," she said softly. "This wasn't about charity. It's about trust. You gave me that once when I didn't deserve it. Now I'm giving it back." He held the key for a long moment, the cool metal warming slowly in his palm. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" She laughed quietly. "Maybe not, but at least this time I got it right." He smiled, shaking his head. "You did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snow drifted outside, lazy and light. The world felt suspended, as if it too was waiting to exhale. Then he said, "You know, I used to think people only did good things because they wanted something back." "And now?" she asked. "Now I think maybe some people do it because they finally understand what it feels like to be seen."
Her eyes glistened. Then maybe we're both learning.
He nodded, still looking at the key. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, she said. Just keep doing what you do. Fix things. Teach people. Be stubborn. He chuckled. I can manage that. She turned to go, then paused at the door. Ethan? Yeah? I'm not good at goodbyes, so let's not call this one. He smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. Then what do we call it? She thought for a moment. A beginning. The door closed behind her, and the cold rushed in for just a heartbeat before the heater caught up. Ethan stood there, the key still in his hand, and realized his throat was tight. Not from sadness, from something gentler, deeper, gratitude. He walked to the workbench and set the key down beside his mother's photo. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered, "Guess we're opening a new chapter, huh?" He didn't expect the tears, but they came anyway, quiet, unashamed. Not because of loss, but because of everything that had been found again. Kindness, trust, forgiveness, hope. Later that evening, he locked up the shop and stepped into the snow. The world around him glowed with the reflection of streetlights, soft and warm. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking toward the new building. The one that would soon be filled with tools, laughter, and the clatter of young mechanics learning how to listen to machines that broke and to people who healed. He reached the door, turned the key, and stepped inside. It smelled of dust and cold metal, but to him it smelled like possibility. He looked up at the bare rafters and whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you, Amelia." And somewhere in the distance, maybe in another part of town, she smiled without knowing why. That night, under a pale winter moon, two very different souls found the same quiet truth: that gratitude doesn't live in words or wealth. It lives in the space where pride ends and kindness begins. Before you go, I'd love to know what you felt in this story. Did Amelia's gesture move you? Did Ethan deserve her trust again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words mean more than you think. And if this story touched you, remember to like the video and subscribe for more stories about redemption, love, and second chances. Every comment and subscription helps us bring more of these moments to life. Thank you for staying till the end. See you in the next story.